Welcome to Me Time with Mind Escape Vibe, where it is your time to be kind to your mind. Oh, April has been a great month. I've had great guests with self care with Melanated Mamas, Stone by Nita, revisiting childhood friendships, and Wantia on to talk about caregivers and being a mompreneur. But today is me. And I want to talk about trying to move forward while standing in the baggage of your past. And I think for me, it is an important topic because that was my learning this month. This month, I found that I was moving very fast, just constantly going because for me, look, my goal is to cultivate and to grow in my business, to grow Mind Escape Vibe, while at the same time continuing to grow and cultivate within me for myself. But one of the things that I received this month, I did my ancestral DNA. I sent the kit off. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get it, but I sent it off maybe end of March, no, March, beginning of March, end of February, somewhere along those lines. And I got my DNA back. What I discovered is that a large percentage of my DNA is Nigerian. And the other portion, about 37%, is Republic of Congo from within that area. And what it forced me to do is to really take a step back and first be grateful because it's different when you actually know where you come from. I do have family history. I know my family history within the United States. I know my family history based on how I was educated from my mom. I know my family history based on what I learned from my bonus dad's family. However, it was never at a point where I actually knew where I came from, where my DNA and ancestral history started. And so when I received those results and the findings, the first thing I did is I shed a tear because it was different for me to feel like, hey, I actually belong somewhere. Now, that sense of belonging is not that the belonging that as humans we strive for in our current world, to belong, to fit in, to want to cultivate friendships, to want to be accepted by others. It was, wow, I belong somewhere. I know where I come from. And I was very excited about that. I was actually very excited about that. But at the same time, I was on the fence with, okay, how do I continue to move forward and how do I continue to strive for what I'm seeking to accomplish if I'm still running from, and I don't want to say running because it's not running. I think it was more of avoiding the events that has happened in my past, in this life, in my past, that were not so pleasant for me as it relates to relationships, and continue to move forward. Because at some point I felt stagnant. I felt like it was just hard to move forward. First I thought, okay, maybe I'm just tired. I need to take a step back and rest. So I took a social media pause. I took a break from that. I just really reflected and focused on me and continued to work on my business, but at the same time, just took a break from a lot of things. But then I still was uneasy inside. I was still uneasy. I still was having trouble with focus and motivation and energy. And so I had to figure out what was going on and why is that. So I meditate, I go into deep prayer. But what I found is I was running from events that happened um, in the earlier part of my life and how it affected current relationships. For example, I've always talked about my older sister on the podcast and how she can pull us in line, how she can pull me in line, and how she can guide me. But at the same time, sometimes when she would guide me, we bump heads and we would go a long period of time without speaking. And part of that was, we would label it as we're mad at each other. But the truth is, for me, it was my way of protecting myself because I wanted to control the narrative. If the conversation wasn't a conversation that I wanted to have, or it didn't end the way I thought it should end, I'd pull away. I'd pull away. My guardrails would come up. I'd stay to myself. But I'm finding that is not how I can continue to move forward and continue to grow, especially as I take this journey of being very mindful of what I want for myself, but also how I treat others. And this month has really been an enlightenment month for me to do that because I have a village surrounding me that they serve as my accountability advocates, and they call me out and say, hey, this has always been a challenge for you, but you need to address this challenge, because if you don't, you won't continue to grow. So today's episode is really about me talking about how I did that. And it really started with knowing where I came from and realizing that in order to move forward and accept where I'm going, I have to be understanding, and I have to take a step back and make amends with what I've avoided because I wanted to control the outcome from my past. And I'm glad that I'm doing that. It's hard. It hasn't been as challenging as I thought it would be because I have, strategies in place to help cope. And that way I don't fall into unhealthy patterns like snarky snacking or just being snarky with individuals and not being open to receive. I stopped closing myself off, in essence. And I'm glad I did that. But at the same time, I also opened myself up to accept who I am, where I come from, and why I moved and shaped in my before now, why I moved and shaped the way I did. So as a kid, every household has their things going on, and I was taught as a kid that whatever goes on in the house stays in the house. I was also taught that family is very important, but at the same time, every time something would go on, I was a middle child. So as that middle child, I would take on this attitude of I am going to be perfect all the time so that I am seen like I am not the problem. And taking on that persona of I have to be perfect all the time, it just changed its form over the years. Now, let me tell you why I'm talking about that. I had a conversation with my sister this month. And because my older sister, and we had a conversation because I had to apologize to her. And the second thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to be very clear with why I wanted to address our sisterhood, our relationship. And I had to apologize to her because she was the oldest. And, she made her own choices based on what she wanted to make her choices on. And she has since grown in that path. For me, I still was holding on to, I have to do this right. I have to show up a different way because of those things. And I said to her, I felt like I had to be perfect because of some of the things that you chose to do that our parents didn't particularly agree with. And she said to me, this is what she said, and it's not verbatim, but it was along these lines. She said, Renee, I made my own choices, and it wasn't because of you or anybody else. It was because I wanted to do what everybody else was doing. I wanted to follow the crowd. I wanted to be accepted. It had nothing to do with you. Now we're on the phone and we're not FaceTiming, and I'm sitting in my backyard, and I tear up because that was freedom for me. I was actually able to release this idea that I had to show up perfect. I was able to release that. And I also said to her, I know we don't always agree, but can we learn to agree but disagree and build our relationship not based on what everybody else says our relationship should be, but just based on what you and I want to do. And she said, yeah, let's do that because we need each other. And it was at that moment, I have to control myself right now because I'm tearing up, that I realized how much I needed that relationship, and how running from that relationship because I wanted to show up perfect and I wanted to control the outcome, how much I had missed out on. What I had missed out on, and the growth that came from those conversations with her, because I felt I had to be perfect. I don't feel like that anymore. I don't feel like I have to show up a certain way because of someone else's choices and how I didn't want to be seen as. Instead, I feel like the best way for me to show up is as me, authentically present in the moment and open to what I'm going to learn. The best way for me to show up is understanding and accepting who I am, where I come from, flaws and all, so that I can continue to grow and be a better version of myself every day. And I believe that each episode of my podcast for April that you've heard this month or that you will listen to this month helped me to get to that point. Melanated self-care with melanated mamas. When I asked them what did they do, they said we walk alongside melanated mamas in their self-care and self-love journey. They help to guide them. And it was those words that made me start to think, okay, I love that. I love it. I love it. But I also had to think for myself in my time of reflection, where am I still growing in my journey? And if I'm not still growing, how can I spark that growth to continue? What do I need to forgive myself for in order to keep going? And I'm thankful. I appreciate their mission statement because it helped me to reflect. And then there was Stone by Nita, my childhood friend from 7th grade, the person that knew me, who talked about the nerd and the dancer and talked about how my family life was different from hers. But she explored that because she was like, wow, this is different. And for me, with our friendship, that was something that I hadn't thought about because I knew she was different from me and she helped me to come out of that shell. So it reminded me to continue to come out of the shell, that coming out the shell doesn't mean that it only happens once or twice in your life. You can come out the shell and evolve throughout life. And it was time for me to take another, to blossom all over again. And that blossoming comes from accepting and being open and receiving and letting go. So my message today in this short podcast episode is, if you are on the fence and you're struggling with, I have to show up a certain way, I have to be perfect, I have to do this, and it's stressing you out because this is something that you strive for every day, and you may have become accustomed to that stress. So you don't realize how much it affects your body and your mind and your soul. It's okay to take a moment, to take a step back and take a breath and to think about, is that really something for you? Is it really for you? Is that helping you grow in any way at all? Is it aligning with the values that you want in your life? Is it purposeful in helping you get to the next level that you're seeking to get to? And if you have a no to any of those things, take a moment to sit quietly, if you can, if that's possible for you, or in your moments of prayer, or whatever it is that you do to just reflect and look within and think about why you're holding on to that perfectionism. Perfectionism is a killer of the soul. It is a chronic disease igniter of the body. It is a breaker of the mind because you're always thinking and you're always stressing about what it is. And then at some point you stop and you criticize yourself, and self-sabotage creeps in. Self-doubt creeps in. So I ask you, just like I had to do and continue to do, if you ask yourself those questions and you find that, hey, it's been something that I've been avoiding it because I wanted to control the outcome. And the best way to control the outcome is to not deal with it, because then I know that I have handled it for me. You haven't handled it. Instead, you've internalized it. You pushed it down. And it is slowly creeping up in your life in other ways. It surfaces in many different situations. You recognize it. I know I did. And I pushed to the wayside because I was like, nope, not going to deal with that. Give yourself the grace to start. Give yourself the grace to start. And I'm going to be very honest with you. It's not easy. But I do hold on to that conversation with my sister because it freed me that day. It freed me. And I hope if you choose to take that path and listen to the words that I'm saying and it resonates with you, that it'll free you too. It'll free you too. And root it all in positive emotions. It may start off very painful. It may hurt, but root it in positive emotions. And if you struggle with trying to figure out what those positive emotions are, that's fine. You can always send me a message and I can help you develop some strategies for that. But just start. Start by thinking about it. Maybe journal about it first. Maybe you have a confidant that you like to talk to that really helps you to think things through and to formulate a plan. Start there. I call those folks accountability advocates because they don't judge you. They just help you get where you need to be. So start there. Pray. Because God is listening. And whatever your religious practices are listening. And know that me time with Mind Escape Vibe, Renee with Mind Escape Vibe, that I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for your success because I'm always rooting for mine. And in order for me to level up, it starts with helping others level up. So I hope that you receive this message well, and that it's a message that resonates with you somehow. But it is possible to revisit what you've avoided and find some form of acceptance so that you can continue to move forward. That's what I hope happens for you, because I'm glad that it's happening for me. I do want to end, before I end, I do want to talk about the May podcast episodes. The May podcast episodes are Corporate Women Speak. I have 5 dynamic women that I've interviewed for this podcast. And the goal of the podcast is really to provide mindfulness tips and strategies that these women have cultivated over the years as they are, and apply them in the workplace, so that you can start to, especially if you're an emerging adult. Let me define what emerging adult means. So an emerging adult, typically I like to start at the ages of 15 to 20. However, in this particular case, you can definitely expand that out to the new college graduate. A lot of college graduates graduate in May. A lot of high school folks graduate in May. And you go into the world thinking that you have to forsake all else to show up at work so they can see your value. So the message with Corporate Women Speak is that you don't have to you should not forsake yourself. And I hope that from each episode, you take an opportunity to sit down and write a self-expectation for yourself, not an expectation for others. I specifically said a self-expectation because it's a running list that evolves. It evolves. You can't write it now and expect for that expectations list in 5 years, 2 years, or even a year to still be the same. And that as you start to write it, you put it close so that you can go back and revisit it, that you can pick up tips from each of these women and just put a little note somewhere. So as you evolve in whatever career choice you decide, you have a nice inventory of practices and tools to use to help on those days where you're just like, what in the crack-a-knuckle ham sandwich is going on here? What did I sign up for? Remember that it's not about what you can't control anybody else, but you can control yourself. Go back to that self-expectations list. Go back to any notes that you may take from these women that are speaking and providing such great information in May. And I hope this message finds you well. This is Me Time with Mind Escape Vibe, where it is your time to be kind to your mind. You guys have a great day.